the knife blade metaphor. Buddhist wisdom for overthinking deep sleep. As you settle into the quiet sanctuary of the evening, letting the weight of the day slide from your shoulders, you are invited to step across the threshold of conventional thinking and enter the profound landscape of Zen. This is a journey into what ancient spiritual masters have long called the religion of no religion. It requires no dogmatic adherence, no rigid theological frameworks, and no prior intellectual training. It asks only for your immediate living presence. By simply allowing your breath to find its natural, unforced rhythm and letting the surface currents of the analytical mind drift away, you open yourself to a timeless current of insight that has quieted anxious minds, dissolved existential stress, and revealed a deep, unshakable peace hiding in plain sight for thousands of years. This exploration is designed not merely to inform the intellect, but to wash over your consciousness like gentle, rhythmic waves, guiding your biological organism into a state of profound rest while illuminating the hidden architecture of your own heart. To truly comprehend the unique approach of Buddhism, one must first recognize how radically it stands apart from the historical structures of most major global spiritual traditions. The vast majority of human religious systems are organized around an axis of external authority, requiring an absolute faith in a supreme creator divinity, the eternal preservation of an individual soul, or the literal infallibility of ancient sacred scripts. Buddhism, however, rejects this paradigm of blind obedience. The historical Buddha did not position himself as a god, a divine messenger, or a prophet delivering a final, unalterable commandment from above. Instead, he functioned as a cosmic physician and a radical empiricist, inviting his students to treat their own minds as a laboratory. He did not ask his followers to believe in concepts they could not personally verify through direct, immediate experience. His standard invitation was summed up in the ancient Pali phrase ehi passiko, which translates literally as an injunction to come and see for oneself. This empirical stance is beautifully illustrated by the Buddha's historical refusal to engage with abstract, speculative metaphysics. When encountered by theologians, scholars, and seekers who demanded definitive answers to the grand philosophical questions of existence, whether the universe had a definitive beginning, whether the soul was identical to or separate from the physical body, or what precisely occurred to an enlightened being after physical death, the Buddha would consistently respond with either an eloquent, thunderous silence or a strategic counter-question, designed to return the seeker's attention straight back to the immediate reality of the present moment. He recognized that human speculation regarding things beyond direct perception was not only futile but actively counterproductive to the urgent work of dismantling immediate psychological suffering. There is a classic account within the early discourses that describes two young priests who were engaged in a fierce, unyielding debate regarding the most authentic, effective path to achieve direct mystical union with Brahma, the supreme creator deity of the Vedic pantheon. Unable to reach a resolution, they approached the Buddha and requested his definitive judgment. Instead of offering a theological analysis or validating one path over the other, the Buddha looked at them calmly and asked a simple, grounding question. Tell me, has any single priest, any scholar, or any spiritual master, going back through 7 generations of your lineage, ever seen Brahma with their own eyes? When the young men sheepishly admitted that no historical figure in their tradition had ever physically witnessed this deity, the Buddha let out a gentle laugh, declaring their absolute fixation on an unverified destination to be vain, empty, and inherently laughable. This historical declaration did not stem from a modern, nihilistic desire to deny the existence of unseen dimensions or cosmic entities. Rather, it arose from the Buddha's profound recognition that theological beliefs are ultimately irrelevant to the practical mechanics of psychological liberation. Traditional Buddhist cosmology does not explicitly deny the presence of gods, deities, or celestial beings, known within the texts as devas. It acknowledges them as powerful, highly radiant organisms that inhabit refined states of existence and enjoy unimaginably long lifespans. However, the radical insight of Buddhism is that these celestial beings, despite their immense power and cosmic privileges, are still completely bound to the great wheel of cyclic existence, known as samsara. They are subject to the absolute laws of change, death, and subsequent rebirth. They are simply experiencing a temporary period of exceptionally pleasant circumstances, heavily financed by their past positive actions. There is another legendary story that underscores this point, describing an exceptionally ambitious monk who climbed through the various layers of the heavens through intense meditative absorption, seeking an answer to a profound question regarding the ultimate cessation of the physical elements. At each celestial layer, he questioned the ruling deities, only to be told that they did not know the answer and that he must ascend higher. Eventually, the monk reached the supreme realm of great Brahma himself, the magnificent being who believed himself to be the omnipotent creator of the cosmos. When the monk posed his question, Brahma pulled him away from the sight of the other gods and whispered in his ear, "Listen, I do not know the answer to your question, but because these other deities believe I am all-knowing, I cannot admit my ignorance in front of them. You must return to the human realm and ask the Buddha." For the Buddha, turning to external gods for absolute liberation was equivalent to a lost traveler asking for directions from another traveler who is equally lost in the wilderness. This is precisely why Zen is so frequently described as the religion of no religion. It strips away the comforting scaffolding of externalized salvation, leaving the human being face to face with the raw reality of their own awareness. It asserts that your freedom cannot be granted by a celestial benefactor, nor can it be stolen by an external demon. The source of your suffering and the source of your liberation both reside entirely within the immediate, present moment operational patterns of your own mind, the path of the middle way, from palace walls to the Bodhi tree. To fully appreciate the practical brilliance of Zen, we must journey back 2,500 years to examine the foundational human trajectory of its ultimate ancestor, Siddhartha Gautama. Born as a royal prince in the luxurious kingdom of the Shakya clan, located in what is now the borderlands of Nepal and India, Siddhartha was raised in a highly synthetic environment of absolute sensory saturation. His royal father, desperate to prevent a prophecy which predicted that his son would abandon the throne to become a wandering spiritual teacher, constructed a hyper-sheltered reality. The prince was provided with 3 distinct palaces tailored to the seasons, surrounded by exquisite gardens, beautiful musicians, and absolute physical comfort. Every trace of human decay, sickness, old age, and mortality was systematically purged from his sight, however. The human spirit cannot be permanently contained within a golden cage of artificial pleasure. As a young man, driven by an innate, irrepressible urge to witness the unvarnished reality of the world, Siddhartha slipped past the palace gates on a series of historic excursions. For the first time in his existence, he encountered the raw, unedited facts of the human condition. He looked upon an old man. Bent and trembling with age, he looked upon a sick man, burning with fever and racked with physical agony. And he looked upon a rigid, decaying corpse being carried to the cremation grounds. These sights struck the young prince with the force of an existential earthquake. The synthetic matrix of his palace life collapsed instantly. He realized that all the wealth, political power, and sensory luxury in the cosmos were completely impotent in the face of the inescapable realities of aging, illness, and death that awaited every single living organism. Deeply shaken by this flash of clear seeing, and filled with a profound sense of urgency, he abandoned his royal title, his inheritance, and his family in the dead of night, shedding his silken robes to adopt the lifestyle of a penniless, wandering seeker. For 6 grueling years, Siddhartha threw himself into the most extreme spiritual practices of his era. He tracked down the most advanced meditation masters of the forest, rapidly mastering their techniques of trance and sensory withdrawal, only to find that when he returned to ordinary consciousness, the fundamental ache of existential uncertainty remained unresolved. He then joined a group of radical ascetics, deducing that if pleasure had failed him, perhaps the absolute torture and denial of the physical form would unlock the secrets of liberation. He starved himself until his body resembled a living skeleton, slept on beds of thorns, and exposed his flesh to the blistering sun and freezing rains, pushing himself to the absolute precipice of physical death. It was at this absolute baseline of physical exhaustion that a memory from his childhood, suddenly illuminated his awareness. He remembered sitting quietly beneath the shade of a rose-apple tree as a boy, simply watching the wind move through the grass, feeling completely at peace without any desire, any striving, or any self-mortification. In that moment of clarity, Siddhartha realized that extreme asceticism was nothing more than the negative image of his former palace life. It was merely a version masquerading as spirituality. Both paths were driven by a violent, reactive relationship to reality. One was an obsession with grasping after pleasure, while the other was an obsession with fighting against pain. Recognizing the futility of these extremes, Siddhartha stepped into the spacious landscape of the middle way. He accepted a simple bowl of rice milk from a village maiden to restore his physical baseline, walked to the banks of the Naranjara River, and sat down beneath the spreading canopy of a massive Bodhi tree. He made a silent, unyielding vow to his own consciousness. I will not leave this seat until I discover the true root cause of human suffering and the definitive path to its permanent cessation. As he sat through the quiet hours of the night, his mind completely stabilized between indulgence and denial, Siddhartha looked deeply into the flowing river of his immediate experience. As the morning star rose over the horizon, the illusion of separation collapsed entirely, and he awakened into the state of Buddhahood. He did not discover a new cosmic law, he simply woke up to what had always been true. He saw that all things in the universe exist as an impermanent, ever-changing dance of conditions, that our desperate attempt to cling to transient forms inevitably generates suffering, and that the isolated, separate self we defend so fiercely is nothing more than a conceptual ghost, a fluid process deeply, seamlessly integrated with the entire fabric of the cosmos. Following this monumental awakening, the Buddha did not retreat into a cave to enjoy his pristine peace in isolation. He spent the remaining 45 years of his life walking the dusty roads of ancient India, teaching individuals from every stratum of society, kings, courtesans, outcast farmers, and intellectual scholars, how to execute this exact same awakening within their own consciousness. He never demanded that anyone believe his words based on his status as an enlightened being. He functioned as a spiritual guide, providing a practical methodology rather than a rigid doctrine, ensuring that Buddhism would forever remain an active, living dialogue between the human mind and the ultimate nature of reality, the anatomy of desire, licking honey from a knife blade. At the very core of the Buddha's systematic diagnosis of the human condition is an incredibly nuanced understanding of the mechanics of desire, tanha, and its structural relationship to existential suffering, dukkha. The Buddha observed that the vast majority of human beings spend their entire lives trapped inside an automated, reactive loop. We are continuously running toward things we perceive as pleasant, trying to grasp them and hold them permanent, while simultaneously running away from things we perceive as unpleasant, trying to suppress them or destroy them. The great tragedy of this reactive architecture is that desire, by its very evolutionary and psychological nature, can never be permanently satisfied. The modern consumerist world operates on the foundational lie that satisfaction is a destination reached by acquiring the next object of desire. We tell ourselves, if I can just secure this specific corporate promotion, if I can just find the perfect romantic partner, if I can just purchase this beautiful home, or if I can just achieve this specific physical aesthetic, then my mind will finally settle into a state of permanent peace. But Zen points to a profound, inescapable truth that you can verify by looking back at the timeline of your own life. The instant an object of intense desire is acquired, a brief, transient flash of relief is experienced. This relief, however, is not actually the pleasure of the object itself. It is simply the temporary neurological cessation of the agonizing itch of craving. Within hours, days, or weeks, this relief fades as the baseline of your mind normalizes to the new acquisition. The old sense of lack returns, the internal simulator reactivates, and you immediately begin dreaming of the next destination, the next purchase, or the next validation. The wheel continues to spin, and the horizon of true satisfaction remains precisely the same distance away. To illuminate the sheer danger of this endless cycle, the Buddha utilized a remarkably striking, visceral metaphor. He stated that the human pursuit of sensory pleasure and selfish desire is exactly like a hungry child attempting to lick a drop of sweet honey from the razor-sharp edge of a naked knife blade. The honey is undeniably sweet. Its taste on the tongue provides a fleeting moment of intense gratification. But in the very act of consuming the sweetness, the child cuts their tongue on the steel, leaving behind a deep, bleeding wound. Every time we grasp at an impermanent form to fulfill our existential need for permanence, we are licking the knife blade. We taste the brief sweetness of the relationship, the status, or the possession, but we cut ourselves on the sharp edge of its inevitable change, loss, or decay. If you observe the landscape of modern society with absolute clarity, you will see the literal truth of this metaphor etched into the very faces of the populace. Walk through any major metropolis and look deeply into the eyes of the elderly, who have spent 70 or 80 years fully immersed in the conventional matrix of chasing societal expectations. So many appear covered in a network of invisible scars, their entire psychological beings composed of accumulated wounds, unfulfilled expectations, and deep-seated disappointments. They spent their youth chasing the illusions of stability and happiness promised by their culture, only to discover at the end of the road that the promises were entirely empty. When they approach the threshold of death, there is rarely a peaceful, radiant smile upon their countenance. There is often only the tragic, heavy decay of their unfulfilled hopes. Conversely, Zen presents the beautiful alternative of the individual who has seen through the illusion of dreams and false desires early in their journey. When a human being stops allowing their mind to be deceived by the continuous propaganda of craving, their relationship to the aging process undergoes a magnificent transmutation. Instead of growing bitter, defensive, and structurally decayed with age, they grow increasingly peaceful, spacious, and beautifully innocent. They return to the untamed clarity of the child, but match it with the profound wisdom of the sage. As their physical form naturally declines, a quiet, radiant splendor begins to surround them. They do not resemble a falling house. They resemble a magnificent, ancient temple through which the eternal light of absolute consciousness shines without obstruction. In their very presence, death ceases to look like a tragic defeat and reveals itself as a natural, beautiful transition. The Zen approach to desire is not to violently suppress it, to condemn it as sinful, or to force yourself into a state of artificial, frozen numbness. Suppression is simply another form of aversion. It is the knife blade cutting you from the opposite direction. Zen invites you to execute a far more sophisticated maneuver. Simply turn the light of your awareness directly upon the movement of desire itself. Observe it with a detached, clinical curiosity. Watch how a thought of lack arises in the mind. Watch how it automatically triggers a physical sensation of tension in the body. Notice how the ego immediately rushes to build an elaborate narrative about how this specific object will save you. When you investigate desire with this level of pristine, uninterrupted presence, you will naturally uncover two monumental insights. First, you will see that desire is not a solid, permanent fact of your identity. It is merely a transient wave of energy passing through your consciousness. Second, you will realize that desire is structurally dependent on the illusion that you are incomplete. The moment you look directly into the spacious core of your own immediate awareness and recognize that you are already fundamentally whole, complete, and alive in this exact breath, the structural foundation of the craving collapses. The mosquito realizes it is trying to bite an iron bull. The false dream evaporates, freeing you instantly from the tyranny of craving and leaving you resting effortlessly in a state of absolute, unshakable satisfaction. The 6 realms of the subconscious, a psychological cartography. Within the rich tapestry of classical Buddhist cosmology, there is an incredibly intricate worldview centered around the wheel of life, or the Bhava Chakra. Traditionally, this cosmic wheel is depicted as being held in the terrifying, unyielding grip of Mara, the demon of time and illusion, and it contains 6 distinct realms of existence into which sentient beings are continuously reborn, based on the moral quality of their actions and intentions. While these realms are frequently interpreted within popular folk religion as literal, geographical destinations across the cosmos spanning from magnificent celestial palaces down to terrifying underworld, fire pit Zen psychology approaches the Bhava Chakra primarily as a flawless, clinical map of the shifting states of the human subconscious mind. At the absolute peak of the wheel reside the devas, or the gods. These are organisms that enjoy states of sublime bliss, immense personal power, and exceptionally long lifespans spent in beautiful environments. In the psychological architecture of daily life, you enter the diva realm whenever you experience flashes of intense joy, creative ecstasy, or temporary worldly success. It is the mental state of the individual who believes they have finally conquered their circumstances, resting in a comfortable, self-satisfied bubble of luxury and privilege. However, the tragedy of the diva realm is its inherent blindness. Because these states are pleasant, the gods become completely complacent, exhausting their positive energy without cultivating wisdom, entirely oblivious to the fact that their elevated position is temporary, and that they are still fundamentally bound to the wheel of change. Directly below the gods is the realm of the asuras, or the angry spirits. These are beings characterized by immense power, intellect, and energy, but their consciousness is entirely consumed by the poisons of jealousy, competition, and an insatiable lust for control. Psychologically, this is the exact mind state of the hyper-ambitious corporate executive, the ruthless politician, or the individual who views every human interaction through the competitive matrix of winning and losing. The asura cannot enjoy their own abundance because they are continuously looking upward at the devas, burning with rage because someone else possesses more status, more power, or a larger kingdom than they do. Their life is an unremitting, exhausting battle to conquer a mountain that has no peak. Sinking further down the wheel, we encounter the animal realm, which is psychologically characterized by the absolute dominance of basic instinct, dullness, and the survival drive. When a human being lives exclusively to satisfy their primitive biological urges, eating, sleeping, mating, and defending their territory, without any self-reflection, any philosophical inquiry, or any conscious awareness, they have dropped directly into the animal realm. It is a state of psychological opacity, driven entirely by fear, habit, and the automated programming of the mammalian brain. Beneath the animals is the tragic domain of the pretas, or the hungry ghosts. In traditional iconography, these entities are depicted with agonizingly bloated, massive bellies but necks as thin as needles and mouths the size of a pinhole. Whenever they attempt to consume food or water, the sustenance turns into burning ash or liquid fire inside their throats, leaving them in a state of perpetual screaming starvation. This is the absolute psychological definition of addiction and chronic dissatisfaction. You become a hungry ghost the instant you fall into the loop of compulsive consumption. Whether it is the addict chasing the next chemical high, the materialist compulsively purchasing items to fill an internal void, or the modern individual scrolling through digital feeds, desperately seeking a hit of validation that can never penetrate the narrow neck of their existential loneliness. At the very baseline of the wheel are the hell realms, spaces of absolute, unmitigated agony, terror, and burning hostility. Psychologically, you cross into hell whenever you are consumed by severe clinical depression, profound grief, paralyzing anxiety, or white-hot psychotic rage. It is a state of total claustrophobia, where your own mind becomes the torturer, the fire, and the cell walls, and it feels as though the suffering is permanent and absolute. Finally, balancing between these extremes is the human realm, which is characterized by a unique equilibrium of pleasure and pain, reason and emotion. It is the only realm on the entire wheel that allows for the development of true self-awareness and spiritual choice, making it the most precious platform for ultimate awakening. The vital, liberating insight that Zen delivers is that enlightenment does not exist anywhere on this wheel. The vast majority of human self-improvement systems, self-help ideologies, and conventional religious paths are simply sophisticated strategies designed to help you climb slightly higher on the wheel, moving you out of the hell and hungry ghost realms and into the human or diva realms. But Zen points out that trying to improve yourself within the matrix of the wheel is an exercise in ultimate futility. Like a knife that is sharpened too much, the steel will eventually wear away to nothing. Whatever goes up must inevitably come down. The highest God will eventually exhaust their positive energy and drop back down into the lower realms of suffering. If you bind yourself to the pursuit of becoming better and better, You are simply chaining yourself to the wheel with golden handcuffs. If you degrade yourself through unexamined reactivity, you are chaining yourself with iron handcuffs. The ultimate goal of Zen is not to become a better prisoner. Inside a higher realm, the goal is to break the chains entirely, shatter the wheel, and step completely out of the simulator. Buddhahood is the radical discovery of the unmoving awareness that contains all 6 realms without being altered by any of them. The Great Illusion, deconstructing the boundary of the isolated ego. At the absolute apex of the Buddha's radical insight into the human condition is the doctrine of anatta, or the profound realization that there is no solid, permanent, and independently existing self or soul residing within the human organism. Zen asserts that the primary source of all our psychological agony, our existential loneliness, and our relational conflict is a foundational optical illusion of consciousness. The belief that we exist as separate, isolated fragments of identity trapped inside sacks of skin, navigating an external universe that is alien to us. Zen does not deny your relative existence. Clearly, your body moves, your eyes perceive, and your historical biography contains unique coordinates of experience. What it categorically denies is the concept that you exist as an independent, self-contained unit, separate from the rest of the cosmos. The ego constructs the concept of the self entirely through the mechanism of artificial separation. It states, "I am in here, you are out there. Therefore, I must protect what is inside this boundary, compete against what is outside it, and continuously manipulate my environment to guarantee my private survival." To shatter this illusion, consider the geographic metaphor of a modern paper map displaying the continents of North and South America. On the surface of the paper, defined by the colorful ink lines of human cartography, these 2 landmasses appear as completely distinct, separate entities divided by vast stretches of blue ocean. But if you dive beneath the surface of the water, descending into the deep geography of the planet, you discover an absolute reality. The ocean floor is a single, uninterrupted expanse of solid stone. The separation is an optical illusion created by where the water happens to meet the air. The continents are not separate things, they are simply the highest peaks of a single, continuous Earth. Human consciousness operates in the exact same manner. On the surface of everyday relative reality, we appear as completely isolated islands of identity. We have separate names, separate physical forms, and separate internal monologues. But the deeper you descend into the core of your own immediate awareness during deep meditation, the more the ink lines of separation begin to soften and fade. When you reach the absolute baseline of pure non-conceptual witness, the boundary of the isolated ego dissolves entirely, revealing that your individual awareness is simply a temporary localized peak of a single universal ocean of consciousness. This teaching of anatta is undoubtedly the most radical, destabilizing, and challenging component of the Buddhist tradition. It strips the human ego of its ultimate comfort blankets. It asserts not only that there is no eternal creator deity out there in the clouds to deliver you from your choices, but also that there is no permanent unchanging soul in here to carry your small egoic personality into an eternal heaven of reward. To the untrained mind, this realization can trigger a wave of profound existential vertigo. If there is no permanent self, if the ego is a fiction, and if death is the complete dissolution of the individual persona, then what is the point of human effort? Why practice meditation? Why love? Why live? But Zen reveals that this very vertigo is the gateway to absolute, unconditioned freedom. The desperate, exhausting struggle to defend, polish, and preserve a permanent self-image is the precise engine that generates all human suffering. When you look deeply into your mind and realize that the fragile, defensive ego you have spent your entire life trying to protect is nothing more than a conceptual mirage, a fluid stream of passing thoughts, memories, and sensory perceptions without a fixed center, the prison door swings open. You no longer need to protect an illusion. You stop viewing the universe as a hostile arena of external threats and discover that you are the universe itself, looking through a localized pair of eyes. You step out of the terrifying isolation of being a separate fragment and rest effortlessly in the deep peace of absolute interconnected wholeness, the 4 Dharma worlds, the Hawaiian blueprint of integrated reality. to provide a sophisticated intellectual foundation for the immediate, non-intellectual practice of Zen. The ancient Huayan school of Buddhism developed an incredibly profound philosophical framework known as the Four Dharma Worlds. This framework operates as a precise multi-dimensional lens, allowing the practitioner to navigate the different layers of reality without falling into the spiritual traps of either blind materialism or detached, aloof mysticism. The first layer of reality is the world of Ji, which defines the everyday landscape of particulars. This is the conventional, three-dimensional reality that our physical senses normally perceive, a world populated by seemingly separate, solid, and distinct entities. In the world of Ji, a mountain is a mountain, a river is a river, a building is a building, and you are a completely distinct person sitting in a specific chair. This is the domain of classical physics, language, and everyday logistics. Zen does not tell you to ignore or denigrate this world. It recognizes Ji as an entirely necessary convention for functional human life. The second layer is the world of Ri, which represents the dimension of absolute unity. When a practitioner stabilizes their mind in deep meditation, looking completely past the surface characteristics of distinct objects, they become intensely aware of the underlying relationships, patterns, and forces that bind all things together. In the world of Ri, the multiplicity of the universe dissolves into a single, undifferentiated oneness. The separate forms vanish, and you perceive the singular, formless energy, the ultimate ground of consciousness from which all particulars emerge. This is the classic mystical experience of absolute unity, where the boundaries between self and world are completely erased. The third layer is the world of Rijiwai, which translates as the dimension where unity and particulars exist in perfect, unobstructed harmony. This is a monumental step beyond simple mysticism. Many spiritual seekers get trapped in the second world, becoming so intoxicated by the experience of absolute oneness that they begin to view the everyday world of particulars as dirty, irrelevant, or an illusion to be avoided. But the world of Rijiwai asserts that the universal and the particular are completely inseparable. It is like a perfect red circle. The color red represents the universal principle, while the circle represents the specific, particular shape. You cannot have the color red in this instance without the circle, nor can you have the circle without the color. The properly integrated, spiritually rounded-out individual does not live exclusively in the clouds of mysticism or the mud of materialism. They embody both simultaneously, recognizing the absolute within the relative, carrying their spiritual awareness seamlessly into their ordinary daily obligations. The fourth and highest layer of reality is the world of GGY, the absolute dimension of the mutual interpenetration of all particulars. This is the supreme pinnacle of Buddhist metaphysics, beautifully illustrated by the ancient cosmological metaphor of Indra's net. Imagine an infinite cosmic web that stretches across the entire universe in every direction. At every single intersection of this web sits a flawless, multifaceted jewel. Because the surface of each jewel is perfectly polished, it reflects not only every other jewel on the entire net, but also the reflections within those jewels, stretching into an infinite mirror play of total interdependence. In the world of GGY, there is absolutely no obstruction, no separation, and no distance between one event and any other event in the cosmos. Every single particular thing contains, implies, and depends upon all other particular things past, present, and future. The entire universe depends upon you for its precise manifestation in this moment, just as you depend entirely upon the weight of the entire universe to draw a single breath. This realization forms the absolute philosophical bedrock for Zen as a practical way of life. It reveals that the ultimate, cosmic mystery is not located in some distant spiritual heaven. It is fully present within the most ordinary, mundane actions of your day. Drinking a single cup of hot tea, washing a greasy dish in the sink, or sneezing in the morning air are not small, insignificant events separate from the cosmos. They are direct expressions of the entire multidimensional universe happening all at once. This is why Zen masters consistently refuse to explain spirituality through abstract intellectual jargon. They simply hand you a cup of tea or point to the moon, inviting you to experience the absolute majesty of the ordinary moment. Fully realized dialectical teaching. Josh's weather and the edge of the blade. The pedagogical methodology of Zen is fundamentally dialectical. It does not operate through the delivery of systematic lectures, static creeds, or dogmatic catechisms. A true Zen master is a spiritual weight balancer. Their primary responsibility is to observe where a student is leaning too far into an intellectual or emotional extreme and deliver an immediate, counterbalancing shock to push them back into the spacious center of the middle way. If a student approaches a master with a mind deeply saturated by the materialistic concerns of the secular world, worrying about money, reputation, and logistics, the master will deliberately reply in the language of profound, absolute spirituality to break their mundane hypnosis. Conversely, if a student approaches with a hyper-spiritualized, arrogant attitude, speaking grandiosely about enlightenment, oneness, and the emptiness of existence, the master will instantly drag them down into the dirt, replying in terms of the aggressively secular or the mundane. There is a classic account concerning the renowned ancient Zen master Joshu that perfectly demonstrates this dialectical agility. A brilliant, highly intellectual student approached him and posed a massive, dramatic metaphysical question. At the absolute end of the cosmic eon, when the entire universe is utterly consumed in a catastrophic fire and everything is destroyed, tell me, will one single thing remain? What is that absolute reality? Joshu did not stroke his beard or offer a profound discourse on the nature of the indestructible Dharmakaya. He looked at the student, felt the cool morning air, and replied with complete simplicity, "It is exceptionally windy again this morning." To the logical intellect, this response looks like a nonsensical evasion, a bad joke, or an intellectual cop-out, but to the eye of Zen, it is a surgical intervention of the highest order. Joshu recognized that the student was completely lost in a theoretical, imaginary future, using cosmic speculation to escape the raw reality of their immediate existence. By pointing directly to the immediate sensation of the morning wind against the skin, Joshu was saying, "Stop trying to conquer a theoretical universe that does not exist, and wake up to the living reality of the wind that is blowing across your face right now." Another classic story describes a student who was working in the monastery kitchen alongside his teacher. Needing to prepare vegetables, the student made a simple request, "Master, please hand me the knife." The master picked up the heavy iron knife and handed it directly to the student, with the razor-sharp steel blade facing forward, holding it by the dull wooden handle. The student recoiled slightly, seeing the danger, and said, "Master, please hand it to me from the other end." The master looked at him with a sharp, unblinking gaze and asked, "What exactly would you do with the other end?" In that single flash of interaction, a simple logistical request was instantly transformed into a profound philosophical mirror. The master was exposing the automated, defensive nature of the student's mind. The student wanted the safe end, the comfortable end, the side of reality that presented no threat to his comfort. By demanding to know what he would do with the safe end, the master was pushing him to see that true spiritual maturity requires an intimate, non-fearful relationship with the sharp, dangerous, and cutting edges of existence. This is the quintessential Zen way of breaking through our habitual, calcified patterns of rational thinking to restore our primary connection with direct, unmediated experience, the special transmission. From Bodhidharma to the marketplace, to accurately trace the lineage of Zen, we must follow a remarkable historical transmission that spans multiple centuries and radically different cultural landscapes. The core insights of Buddhism originated in India, deeply embedded in the rich philosophical soil of Vedic inquiry. As the centuries progressed, these teachings naturally expanded outward across the Asian continent, mutating and adapting to the unique environmental and psychological conditions of each culture they encountered. In the 6th century of the Common Eon, an extraordinary legendary figure named Bodhidharma, a fierce blue-eyed Indian monk who had spent decades in intense meditative absorption, traveled across the mountains into China. According to historical tradition, upon his arrival, he was granted an immediate audience with the powerful Chinese emperor, Wu of the Liang dynasty. The emperor, a deeply religious man who had invested massive imperial resources into building Buddhist temples, financing monasteries, and translating sacred scriptures, proudly listed his achievements and asked Bodhidharma, "Tell me, What is the absolute spiritual merit of my good deeds? Bodhidharma looked at the most powerful monarch in China and replied with absolute freezing bluntness. No merit whatsoever. The emperor, shocked and deeply offended by this apparent disrespect, demanded to know the foundational principle of the holy teachings. Bodhidharma replied, "Vast emptiness, nothing holy." Desperate to re-establish his authority, the emperor asked, "Who exactly is standing before me then?" Bodhidharma looked at him and said, "I have absolutely no idea." He turned on his heel, walked out of the palace, and spent the next 9 years sitting in silent meditation facing a stone wall in a remote cave. This historic disruptive interaction marks the birth of Chan Buddhism in China, which would later travel to Japan and become known as Zen. Bodhidharma summarized this radical shift away from institutional religiosity in a famous 4-line proclamation that remains the absolute definition of the tradition, a special transmission outside the scriptures not founded upon words and letters, directly pointing to the human mind seeing into one's nature and attaining Buddhahood. When Chan Buddhism matured in China, it represented a magnificent, organic synthesis of classical Indian Buddhist psychology with the indigenous wisdom of ancient Chinese Taoism. Taoism contributed a deep, unshakable appreciation for naturalness, simplicity, spontaneous action, and harmony with the unforced flow of the natural world. This synthesis stripped Buddhism of its dense, heavily scholastic Indian terminology, transforming it into a razor-sharp, highly practical way of living that valued direct, non-conceptual experience far above theoretical knowledge or monastic pageantry. As the centuries unfolded, Zen produced an astonishing array of masters who utilized increasingly unconventional, dynamic tactics to shock their students out of their intellectual hypnosis. They shouted, they struck walking sticks against the floor, and they presented their disciples with the art of the impossible question, the koan. A koan is a carefully engineered psychological paradox that cannot be resolved through logical analysis or intellectual speculation. Questions like, what is the sound of one hand clapping, or what was your original face before your parents were born, are designed to act as a direct assault on the rational ego. The koan behaves exactly like a mechanical wrench jammed into the spinning gears of the analytical mind. The student meditates on the paradox day and night, exhausting every single rational strategy until the intellect hits a wall of absolute extremity, a state known as the great doubt. It is the psychological predicament of a mosquito attempting to bite a solid iron bull. There is absolutely nowhere for the teeth to sink in, nothing the ego can do, and yet nothing it can abandon. It is at this absolute precipice of cognitive exhaustion that the illusion of the separate, analyzing self suddenly snaps, opening the way for Kensho or Satori, a direct, instantaneous flash of insight into the unconditioned nature of your own baseline awareness, the wabi-sabi universe. Finding the cosmic in the imperfect, one of the most profound, culturally visible expressions of the Zen mindset, is the way it completely revolutionized the landscape of traditional aesthetics, art, and daily activities across East Asia. In most Western and classical global traditions, high art is structurally associated with symmetry, grandiosity, permanence, and flawless perfection. We build massive, towering marble cathedrals and paint highly symmetrical, idealized forms designed to mirror an eternal, perfect heaven. Zen aesthetics, however, rejects this pursuit of idealized perfection as an act of denial against the fundamental laws of reality. Because Zen is grounded in the absolute realization of impermanence, anicca, and emptiness, it celebrates a completely alternative design philosophy known as wabi-sabi, the deep, quiet appreciation of that which is incomplete, irregular, weathered, and transient. This philosophy is beautifully embodied in the traditional Japanese art of kintsugi, which translates literally as golden joinery. When a highly prized ceramic tea bowl falls and shatters on the floor, a conventional craftsman will attempt to discard it or repair it using clear, invisible adhesive, trying desperately to mask the fracture and restore the illusion of flawless perfection. A Zen craftsman handles the disaster in a completely different manner. They mix liquid lacquer with genuine pulverized gold and use this brilliant metallic paste to bind the broken shards back together. The result is an object that does not hide its trauma. The gold lines actively highlight the fractures, transforming the history of the break into the most beautiful, valuable component of the vessel. The bowl is treasured far more because it was broken, not despite it. This is a profound living lesson for the human psyche. Most of us spend our lives trying to hide our emotional fractures, masking our vulnerabilities, and pretending to be flawless, symmetrical structures of success. Zen invites you to practice kintsugi on your own soul, to stop treating your past heartbreaks, your psychological wounds, and your structural vulnerabilities as sources of shame, and instead gild them with the gold of kind, spacious awareness. Your scars are not flaws to be hidden. They are the precise coordinates where history has touched you, rendering you uniquely beautiful, resilient, and real. This aesthetic of exquisite simplicity and reverence for the ordinary saturates every single Zen-influenced art form, from the sparse, weathered stones of a rock garden to the spontaneous, uncorrected brushstrokes of a Sumi ink painting. The subject matter of the greatest Zen art is never grand, mythological deities, or triumphant historical battles. It is almost always the most ordinary, overlooked fragments of reality: a single pine branch bent by the wind, a solitary frog sitting on a mossy stone, or a clump of wild bamboo growing in the mist. Consider the most famous Zen haiku in history, composed by the wandering poet Basho. Translated literally, it contains no philosophical analysis, no religious terminology, and no moral lesson whatsoever. An old silent pond, a frog jumps into the water. Plop, to the untrained Western eye. This looks like a childish fragment of observation, but to the mind of Zen, this poem is a masterpiece of absolute presence. Basho does not tell you how he feels about the pond. He does not build a complex philosophical metaphor about the transience of life. He simply records the raw, unmediated facts of a single, ordinary moment fully experienced. There is the silence of the old pond, the sudden spontaneous movement of the frog, and the immediate crisp sound of the splash. The splash is just a splash, nothing more, nothing less. Yet, when that sound is met with absolute, uninterrupted awareness, it contains the entire multi-dimensional universe within its echo. It is the realization that enlightenment is not an exotic, distant planet you reach by escaping your daily life. It is the true nature of your immediate, ordinary experience when the fog of conceptual thinking is completely cleared away. The digital Zen master, navigating compulsion in the modern hypnosis. As we bring the profound insights of ancient Zen Buddhism out of the quiet forest monasteries of the past and into the hyper-accelerated reality of the 21st century, we encounter a landscape of psychological friction that the ancient masters could never have physically imagined. We live in an era characterized by an unprecedented global phenomenon: the systematic, algorithmic fragmentation of human attention through digital distraction. The modern individual exists in a state of chronic, low-grade hypnosis, completely mediated by digital interfaces. The vast majority of the global population checks their smartphone within 5 minutes of waking up in the morning, and the average human being now interfaces with their device over 150 times every single day. We check our screens while eating, while walking through nature, and even during intimate, face-to-face conversations with our loved ones. Our attention is continuously sliced into microfragments by a relentless barrage of notifications, emails, short-form videos, and digital validations. This constant fragmentation is not a harmless logistical convenience. It is a radical psychological crisis that is actively reshaping the neural architecture of the human brain. It trains the mind to become completely intolerant of silence, space, and the unforced tempo of the present moment. The instant a brief gap emerges in the day while waiting in a line, riding in an elevator, or sitting at a red light, a wave of subtle, unconscious anxiety rises within the nervous system. The ego, terrified of encountering the spacious void of its own unconditioned presence, automatically reaches for the pocket device to anesthetize the discomfort with a fresh hit of digital dopamine. A modern Zen approach to this crisis does not involve a naive, moralistic demonization of technology, nor does it require you to abandon society to become a digital hermit in the mountains. Zen is fundamentally pragmatic. It invites you to treat your smartphone as the ultimate high-alert Zen master sitting right in your pocket. The next time you experience the automated, compulsive urge to reach for your phone, you must execute the protocol of the conscious pause before your hand physically touches the device. Freeze the frame of your behavior and turn the light of your awareness 180 degrees inward upon your own organism. Ask yourself with exquisite precision, what exactly is the driving force behind this physical compulsion in this precise second? What is the subterranean emotion that I am attempting to escape? Look closely beneath the surface of the physical urge. You will almost always discover a hidden pocket of raw psychological friction, a sudden wave of boredom, a sense of creative inadequacy, an ambient undercurrent of loneliness, or a vague, running anxiety that you are missing out on something better somewhere else. Most phone checking is driven entirely by this restless refusal to inhabit the fullness of the current coordinate of space and time. By bringing kind, non-judgmental awareness to the compulsion, you instantly break its automated, unconscious power over your nervous system. You realize that you do not actually need to check the screen. You simply need to breathe into the subtle wave of unease that triggered the urge. You treat the screen not as an escape route, but as a boundary marker reminding you to return to the rich, multi-dimensional reality of the present room. You look at the texture of the table before you, feel the physical weight of your feet flat against the floor, and listen to the immediate sounds of your room. You discover that the ordinary moment, completely unfiltered by digital mediation, is not a barren space of boredom, but a vast, luminous, and deeply satisfying reality that contains everything you have ever been looking for. Somatic processing of difficult emotions, shifting from script to sensation, one of the most profound, life-altering domains where Zen psychology delivers a radical alternative to modern Western paradigms, is in our direct, intimate relationship with difficult emotional states such as acute anxiety, deep grief, white-hot anger, and paralyzing fear. In the conventional matrix of modern society, we are systematically conditioned to treat uncomfortable emotions as clinical problems to be solved, internal errors to be corrected, or enemies to be aggressively managed and suppressed. When a wave of intense anxiety or fear rises within our consciousness, our immediate habitual reaction is to enter a state of high-alert internal war. We run away into distractions, we anesthetize the body with substances, or we enter the intellectual theater of the mind, spinning an endless catastrophic narrative about why we are anxious, what is going to happen to us, and how we can fix it. The tragedy of this approach is that the narrative script completely feeds the emotional fire. The story generates more anxiety, the anxiety hardens the story, and the emotion becomes a solid, terrifying entity that completely dominates our internal landscape. Zen offers a surgical, counterintuitive maneuver that completely collapses this cycle of suffering. Drop the script and track the sensation. Zen psychology asserts that an emotion is not an absolute intellectual truth, it is a temporary, composite configuration of biological energy moving through the physical architecture of your body. Anxiety cannot exist as an abstract concept. It requires a localized physiological real estate within your flesh to be perceived. The next time you are ambushed by a heavy wave of anxiety or emotional distress, you must flatly refuse to enter the cinema of the mind. Do not try to analyze the source of the emotion. Do not try to fix your life choices. Do not argue with the thoughts. Instead, execute the great somatic shift. Turn your entire focus directly down into the physical geography of your body. Ask yourself, where is this anxiety living in my flesh right now? Scan your body with microscopic precision until you locate the visceral contraction. Look for the tight, suffocating knot directly over your anatomical heart, the hollow, nauseating fluttering in the pit of your stomach, the hot, electric constriction around your throat, or the cold, rigid armoring across your jaw and shoulders. Once you locate the physical coordinates of the emotion, zoom in on it with absolute non-judgmental curiosity. Investigate the raw properties of the sensation, as if you were a scientist discovering a new biological specimen. What are its exact dimensions? Does it have a clear shape, or are its boundaries fluid? Is it heavy, cold, sharp, or vibrating with high-frequency electricity? Once you have mapped its physical architecture, deploy the practice of radical non-resistant inhabitation. Breathe directly into the absolute center of the physical knot, granting it absolute unconditional permission to exist within your body. Say to that contraction of pain, through the language of pure presence, I see you. You are allowed to be here. As you maintain this steady, unmoving gaze upon the raw physical reality of the sensation, an extraordinary alchemical shift occurs because you have completely withdrawn the fuel of the mental storyline. The thought wheel begins to starve and lose its momentum. Simultaneously, the trapped biological energy within the body, finally met with spacious, non-defensive awareness, begins to lose its solid, terrifying appearance. You realize that the anxiety is not a permanent monster that has conquered your identity. It is merely a fluid, ever-changing ripple of heat, pressure, and movement that rises, peaks, and naturally dissolves back into the wide, pristine space of your true consciousness. Resistance is the only force that freezes an emotion in place. Spacious presence is the universal solvent that sets it free. The illusion of achievement. Finding aliveness in the process, we live within a global culture that is profoundly intoxicated by the mythology of achievement, ambition, and continuous self-improvement. From early childhood, we are systematically conditioned to measure the absolute value of a human life exclusively by its external productivity, its linear progress, and its accumulation of goals. We are trained to become permanent future dwellers, treating the immediate present moment merely as a functional stepping stone, a necessary logistical inconvenience that we must endure to reach a highly idealized destination in the future. This hyper-ambitious conditioning produces an exceptionally common psychological profile. The high-achieving corporate executive, the relentless entrepreneur, or the ambitious creative who possesses a magnificent 5-year plan, a rigorous productivity system, and a trail of massive professional victories, yet carries a deep, pervasive sense of internal hollow numbness. They reach the peak of the mountain they have spent a decade climbing, stand at the summit, and look around only to be ambushed by a terrifying whisper of consciousness. Is this absolutely all there is? Zen addresses this cultural hypnosis with an incredibly sharp, counterintuitive wisdom. If a high-powered, goal-oriented individual were to sit before a Zen master, proudly mapping out their complex strategies for future success, the master would not praise their ambition. They would look them straight in the eyes and ask a deeply grounding, simple question. With all this meticulous planning, all this intense striving, and all this continuous achieving, tell me, when exactly do you intend to actually live? When was the last time you fully, completely experienced the drinking of a single cup of tea without your mind secretly sprinting ahead to the next corporate meeting, the next email, or the next project? Zen points to a foundational, inescapable law of reality. Life only ever occurs right now. The future is nothing more than a conceptual phantom and imaginary mental simulation that can only ever be experienced when it arrives as the present moment. If you train your mind to become an expert in postponing its aliveness until a specific set of future conditions is met, you will remain a psychological beggar for your entire existence. Even if you achieve every single goal on your checklist, your conditioned habit of striving will automatically reactivate, pulling you out of the new present and projecting your happiness onto the next distant horizon. This insight does not instruct you to abandon your meaningful career, to discard your creative ambitions, or to sit passively in the dirt doing nothing. Zen is not an ideology of lazy resignation. It invites you to execute a far more elegant internal alignment. Hold your goals exceptionally lightly, and pour your entire life force into the process itself. Shift the absolute source of your fulfillment away from the external reward of the destination, and anchor it deeply within the immediate texture of the action you are performing in this second. When you write an email, write it with the total, absolute presence of a master calligrapher. When you enter a business meeting, listen to your colleagues with the pristine, unblinking attention of a mirror. When you wash a glass, let the boundary between the worker and the work dissolve entirely, entering what modern psychology calls the flow static condition, where the frantic, analyzing ego drops away, leaving only the pure, joyful, and vibrant dance of the action itself. You discover that true fulfillment is not a prize waiting for you. At the end of a corporate checklist, it is the inherent natural radiance of your own awareness, fully claimed in the ordinary majesty of the present moment, intimate mortality, the beautiful metaphor of the brightly burning candle. There is no domain of human existence where modern global culture exhibits more intense denial, avoidance, and terror than in our relationship with the natural processes of aging, physical illness, and our inevitable mortality. We treat death as a catastrophic failure of medical technology, a terrifying clinical enemy to be fought with aggressive resistance, or a horrific taboo topic to be systematically pushed out of polite conversation. We invest massive collective resources into masking the physical signs of aging, desperately trying to preserve an illusion of permanent youth, keeping ourselves in a state of continuous, low-grade panic regarding the fragility of our biological forms. Zen explicitly tears down this heavy wall of denial, inviting the practitioner into a deep, fearless intimacy with the absolute reality of impermanence anicca. In traditional Zen monastic settings, the awareness of mortality is not avoided. It is kept aggressively at the very center of daily life. Monks frequently sleep with their heads resting upon small, hard wooden boxes that serve as pillows, which often contain inscribed verses or symbolic images explicitly reminding them of the skeletal reality beneath their flesh. This practice is not born from a morbid, depressing obsession with decay. It is born from the profound recognition that a clear-eyed, unblinking awareness of death is the ultimate engine for authentic, vibrant living. Consider the beautiful testimony of a seasoned hospice nurse who spent decades practicing Zen alongside her medical work. She noted that conventional medical training taught her to view the death of a patient as a technical defeat, a clinical failure to be managed with frantic procedures and nervous, artificial chatter. Zen, however, completely transformed her internal posture. It taught her to enter the room of a dying human being, not as a frantic technician, but as a spacious, unshakable monument of pure presence. She recounted sitting quietly with a man who was in the final hours of his physical transition. Instead of checking monitors, adjusting unnecessary machinery, or filling the sacred space with anxious verbal noise, she simply sat perfectly still beside his bed, completely aligning her breath with his slowing, irregular respirations. She held the space with absolute stillness, without any fear, any avoidance, or any desire for the moment to be different than it was. In a brief flash of lucidity, the man opened his eyes, looked deeply into her calm countenance, and whispered, "Thank you for not being afraid to stand here in the dark with me." Those words revealed the ultimate spiritual tragedy of modern society. Our own terror of mortality frequently prevents us from delivering the most precious gift a human can give, the absolute, non-fearful sanctuary of our presence to those who need it most. Zen asserts that a human being who has spent their life looking directly into the reality of impermanence grows increasingly magnificent, peaceful, and innocent as the physical body ages. They do not resemble a decaying structure. They resemble an ancient sacred temple that radiates a quiet, absolute splendor, because they never allowed their mind to be deceived by false desires or the illusion of permanence. They approach the threshold of death with an unblemished, childlike clarity. They have spent their life learning how to let go of forms, roles, and possessions, meaning that when the universe finally asks for their physical body back, there is absolutely no resistance, no grasping, and no terror. The Buddha offered a spectacular, transcendent metaphor for this final transition. He stated that if a human being lives their life with absolute awareness, burning brightly like a pure candle from both ends at once, their physical death becomes a magnificent, beautiful event to witness. You will see their awareness shine with its absolute highest intensity at the very end of the road. In their final moments, their entire earthly incarnation concentrates into a single, white-hot flame of pure presence. The physical body drops away like empty packaging, and they dissolve into the formless, timeless ocean of absolute consciousness from which they were never truly separate. They do not die, they simply return home, leaving behind an echo of pristine peace that continues to bless the world long after the flame has vanished. Seeing beyond the script, radical seeing in human relationships. The vast majority of our human relational suffering, the chronic conflict, the bitter disappointments, and the sudden collapses of our partnerships, from the fact that we rarely look at the actual, living human beings who stand directly before us. Instead, the ego constructs a highly complex, rigid mental script about who the other person is, how they should behave, what they must deliver to guarantee our happiness, and how their past faults define their current identity. We view our partners, our children, and our friends through a dense, distorted filter of accumulated grievances, future anxieties, and self-centered expectations. We are not in a relationship with a real person. We are in a relationship with a conceptual ghost of our own making. There is a powerful account from a high-stakes relationship retreat that beautifully maps the physics of this conditioning. A couple on the absolute precipice of a bitter divorce attended the event as a desperate, final resort. During the primary exercise of the training, they were instructed to sit directly opposite one another, look into each other's eyes, and maintain absolute physical silence for 5 uninterrupted minutes. They were explicitly commanded to drop all past arguments, all future worries, and all internal monologues, and simply practice the art of radical seeing. After the first 2 minutes of intense discomfort, the historical armor of the mind suddenly fractured. The husband looked at his wife and was overwhelmed by a sudden, profound realization. He was looking at an entirely fresh, living human being, completely independent of his grievances. After the exercise, he shared with tears in his eyes, "I saw my wife today for the first time in 15 years. I didn't see the person who forgot my family's dates. I didn't see the person who argued with me about finances, and I didn't see the character I wanted her to be. I saw her exactly as she actually is right now, fragile, beautiful, and fully alive." This revolutionary moment of true seeing is the ultimate gift that Zen brings to human relationships. It invites you to systematically practice the beginner's mind shoshin with the people you see every single day. The next time you interface with your partner or a family member, consciously execute a complete purge of your mental archive. Intentionally drop the script that says, "She is always critical" or "He never listens." Look at them freshly in this exact second, recognizing that they are a fluid, ever-changing dance of conditions, completely empty of a permanent, fixed identity. Meet them at the 0 point of the present moment. When you practice seeing without preconceptions, you discover that the division between self and other is an absolute illusion. You realize that their joy is mathematically inseparable from your joy, and their suffering is deeply interwoven with your own suffering. Compassion ceases to be a performative moral obligation, handed down from an external ethical system. It emerges naturally as the organic expression of your fundamental interconnection. You treat the other person with exquisite tenderness, because you see clearly that they are simply another wave of the exact same ocean of consciousness that you are. To illustrate the absolute necessity of letting go of past historical weight within relationships, Zen masters frequently recount the classic story of the 2 monks traveling together on a deeply muddy forest road after a torrential rainstorm. As they walked, they encountered a beautiful young woman dressed in an exquisite silk kimono, standing helplessly at the edge of a massive deep puddle of mud, unable to cross without completely ruining her clothes. Without a single word of hesitation, the elder monk stepped forward, physically picked the woman up into his arms, carried her safely across the deep mud, and set her down gently on the dry grass on the other side. The woman offered a polite bow of gratitude, and the 2 monks continued their journey in absolute silence. 5 long hours passed as they walked deeper into the forest, the silence growing increasingly heavy and tense. Finally, the younger monk, completely unable to contain his internal fury any longer, burst out, "As celibate monks, we are explicitly forbidden from touching women, especially beautiful young ones. Why on earth did you do that? You violated our sacred vows." The elder monk stopped walking, looked at his young companion with a gaze of profound, gentle compassion, and replied, "My dear brother, I left that woman by the puddle 5 long hours ago. Tell me, why exactly are you still carrying her inside your head?" This humorous, razor-sharp story exposes the exact mechanism of how we torture ourselves within our relationships. Something occurs: a partner makes a thoughtless, cutting remark, a friend forgets a significant arrangement, or a colleague executes a minor betrayal. The actual physical event lasts for a few fleeting seconds or minutes, but our untrained mind refuses to leave the event at the puddle. We pick it up, carry it into our internal world, and transport it across hours, days, weeks, and sometimes decades. We replay the scene thousands of times, staging elaborate internal arguments, building massive legal cases for how we have been wronged, completely blinding ourselves to the reality of the life that is happening right now. Zen cuts the ropes of this exhausting burden. It commands you to leave the woman at the puddle, clear the internal field, and step freshly into the pristine sanctuary of the current breath, silencing the internal judge, the space beyond self-criticism. One of the most universal, deeply entrenched engines of human psychological suffering is the continuous, tyrannical presence of the inner critic. The vast majority of human beings operate with an internal soundtrack that is chronically hostile, a persistent, judgmental voice that continuously critiques their performance, highlights their inadequacies, compares them unfavorably to others, and declares them fundamentally lacking in worth. This internal voice is so intimate, so continuous, and so deeply grooved into our neurological pathways that we routinely make the catastrophic error of mistaking it for reality, or worse, for a form of necessary wisdom that keeps us disciplined. Consider the classic account of a highly successful writer who found himself trapped in a state of absolute, paralyzing creative block for over a year. Desperate for resolution, he attended an intensive silent Zen retreat. During a private interview with the resident teacher, the writer confessed his inner agony. "Whenever I sit down at my desk to write a single line, a violent, mocking voice materializes in my head. It tells me my ideas are completely worthless, that I am a pathetic fraud, and that I am fooling myself to think I possess a single drop of genuine talent. The criticism is so loud that I freeze, close the laptop, and fall into a state of deep despair." The Zen teacher did not offer a series of psychological affirmations. He did not tell the writer to fight the voice or to write down a list of his positive achievements. He looked at the writer with an absolute, piercing clarity and asked a single, transformative question. "Tell me, when you hear that terrifying critical voice echoing inside your skull, who exactly is the one who is hearing it?" This question struck the writer with the force of an absolute awakening. It created an immediate tectonic shift in his internal landscape. He realized for the first time in his existence that there was a vast, silent, and completely unblemished awareness within him that was capable of observing the critical voice. If he could hear the voice, it meant he was not the voice. The voice was an object appearing within the field of his consciousness, while he was the wide-open, permanent space that contained it. The teacher smiled and delivered the simple protocol for creative liberation. The next time the inner critic begins its lecture at your desk, do absolutely nothing to fight it. Do not argue with it, do not try to prove it wrong. Simply apply the neutral mental label, thinking. Notice it exactly like an empty cloud passing across the sky of your mind, and gently, effortlessly return your entire attention to the physical sensation of your breath and the movement of your pen. By executing this practice consistently, the writer discovered the ultimate Zen insight regarding the nature of thought. We are not our thoughts. Thoughts arise, persist for a few seconds, and naturally pass away within the mind like ephemeral weather patterns crossing an infinite sky. The sky itself, your baseline, pristine awareness, is never scratched, never stained, and never diminished by the violent nature of the storm clouds moving through it. By shifting your ultimate identity away from the chaotic content of the thinking process and anchoring it firmly within the wide-open, unmoving context of awareness itself, you find absolute, permanent freedom from the tyranny of self-judgment, the freedom of simplicity, reclaiming the internal kingdom. The wisdom of Zen applies with absolute, revolutionary precision to how we relate to our material possessions, our patterns of consumption, and the modern global matrix of hyperconsumerism. We live within a global economic architecture that is structurally dependent on the continuous generation of internal lack. From morning until night, our senses are bombarded with highly sophisticated marketing messages designed to convince us that we are incomplete, inadequate, and structurally deficient as we are, and that happiness is a prize reached by acquiring the next item of apparel, the next digital gadget, or the next luxury vehicle. The tragedy of this chase is that the accumulation of external possessions provides nothing more than a transient, highly deceptive hit of satisfaction. The instant the new item is secured, the ego experiences a brief flash of inflation, but within a matter of days, the novelty evaporates. The baseline of desire normalizes, the internal void reopens, and the craving for more returns with its original predatory velocity. We become modern versions of the hungry ghosts bloated with material items, yet fundamentally starving for true internal peace. Consider the powerful testimony of a highly successful international businessman who had spent decades accumulating multi-million-dollar properties, luxury vehicles, and an immense collection of high-status material assets. Despite his external wealth, his mind was a war zone of continuous anxiety, hypervigilance, and existential exhaustion. Following an immersive encounter with Zen meditation, he executed a radical restructuring of his entire life. He systematically downsized his reality, selling his massive estates to move into a simple, beautiful apartment containing only the items that possessed functional utility and genuine aesthetic value. He shared that this process was not an act of bitter masochistic self-denial or religious self-punishment. It was a profound act of luxury and liberation. He discovered that every single possession you acquire from the external world demands an immediate investment of your internal life force. Possessions require maintenance, insurance, storage, protection, and continuous mental energy. The more things you own, the more your mind is occupied by the fear of losing them. By clearing out the material clutter of his life, he instantly reclaimed the vast, pristine territory of his own attention. Zen psychology exposes the deep matrix of consumerism. Whatever you lack on the inside, you will desperately try to gather from the outside world. Psychologists have long noted that individuals who harbor deep-seated feelings of internal powerlessness, unworthiness, or existential weakness are almost always the ones who possess the most intense desire to acquire high status, expensive luxury assets. They use the best car, the flashiest watch, or the largest mansion as an artificial external exoskeleton to project an image of power and importance because their internal strength has completely withered away. They need to become the speeding car on the highway to feel alive. This mechanism explains the pathological psychology of the political class and the hyper-ambitious elite. Individuals rarely seek immense global power or political dominance unless they are attempting to resolve an acute, screaming sense of structural interior inferiority. They need the applause of millions, the control of nations, and the validation of history to convince themselves that they are important because, deep within the silent chambers of their own souls, they do not truly believe in their own inherent value. They are spiritual beggars masquerading as kings. Zen cuts through this tragedy by inviting you to discover the absolute freedom of internal completeness. When you sit quietly in meditation, looking past the continuous propaganda of lack, you discover that you are already an infinite kingdom of peaceful presence. You need absolutely nothing from the external world to validate your right to exist in this breath. You are already complete, already beautiful, and already whole. When you rest in this unshakable internal baseline, the desperate urge to acquire, consume, and manipulate drops away completely. You can enjoy material items when they are present, but you are never defined or imprisoned by their absence. You relax into the simple, majestic beauty of your own true identity, completely free from the matrix of consumption. Just sitting. The high-level operational mechanics of Zazen to ground all these grand philosophical insights into a living, somatic reality. The Zen tradition relies entirely on a single supreme behavioral platform, Zazen, or seated meditation. While other global spiritual paths often involve complex visualization techniques, intense breath manipulation, the chanting of esoteric mantras, or the pursuit of exotic altered states of consciousness, Zen meditation is characterized by a radical, unyielding minimalism. In the Soto Zen tradition particularly, founded by the absolute master Dogen Zenji in the 13th century, Zazen is defined by the precise practice of Shikantaza, which translates literally as just sitting. Zazen is not a method designed to make you enlightened. It is the literal, physical expression of your enlightenment itself. You do not sit to become a Buddha. You sit as a Buddha. The physical posture is engineered with absolute empirical precision to support a state of maximum neurological alertness, matched with absolute biological relaxation. The structural instructions for just sitting. To execute Zazen in your daily life, follow this precise physical protocol, the foundation of the base. Sit on a firm, round cushion zafu on the floor or choose a straight-back chair. If sitting on the cushion, Cross your legs in the half lotus or full lotus position, ensuring that both of your knees rest firmly against the mat, creating a highly stable three-point triangular base. If using a chair, place both feet flat against the floor, ensuring your thighs are parallel to the ground. The alignment of the axis. Straighten your spine with absolute dignity, allowing each vertebra to stack naturally like a column of golden coins. Extend the crown of your head gently toward the sky, tucking your chin slightly inward to lengthen the back of the neck. Roll your shoulders back and allow them to drop away from your ears completely, opening the wide architecture of your chest. The hand gesture, the cosmic mudra. Place your dominant hand palm upward in your lap, rest your non-dominant hand flat inside it, and bring the tips of your thumbs together so they gently touch, forming a perfect open oval. This is the cosmic mudra structural barometer of your attention. If your mind drifts into daydreams, your thumbs will naturally separate. If your mind falls into drowsiness, your thumbs will collapse against one another. Keep the oval perfect, the stance of the senses. Keep your eyes slightly open, allowing a soft, unfocused gaze to rest upon the floor about 3 to 4 feet in front of you. This prevents the mind from falling into the dark cinema of dreaming which occurs when eyes are closed, while simultaneously minimizing external visual distraction. Keep your jaw completely relaxed, with the tip of your tongue resting gently against the roof of your mouth behind your front teeth. Once this physical posture is locked into place, your only assignment is to do absolutely nothing else. You just sit. You do not try to stop your thoughts. You do not try to clear your mind. You do not seek a special spiritual state. You allow the river of your mind to move exactly as it wants to move. Thoughts of work will arise. Let them arise. Waves of boredom or physical restlessness will emerge. Let them emerge. You do not serve them tea. You do not chase them down the highway. You do not push them away. You simply sit as the vast, sky-like space of awareness that contains the entire movement. Over 20 or 30 minutes of this unforced presence, a monumental realization naturally dawns. You see that the frantic, restless, and anxious ego you thought you were is merely a temporary storm cloud passing through an infinite, pristine field of clear awareness that is already permanently free. Effortless sleep, the transition into the endless ocean of night. As our long-form journey through the magnificent architecture of Zen Buddhism draws to its natural completion, it is time to allow the conceptual maps, the ancient stories, and the philosophical frameworks to drop away entirely from your active consciousness. The wisdom of Zen is not a heavy pack of intellectual information that you must carry on your back. It is a gentle, soaking rain that absorbs naturally into the dry earth of your soul while you rest. You do not need to remember a single phrase or analyze a single concept. Allow your physical organism to fully surrender to the deep, unforced embrace of the evening. Feel the absolute weight of your body completely supported by the bed or surface beneath you, recognizing that you have absolutely nowhere else to go, nothing else to achieve, and no one else to protect in this second. Your work for the day is entirely finished. Let your breath find its absolute baseline flowing in and out of your body, like the rhythmic, unforced movement of the ocean tide. Your body possesses an impeccable, innate biological wisdom. It knows precisely how to breathe. It knows precisely how to heal. And it knows precisely how to transition into the deep sanctuary of restorative sleep. You only need to get your striving ego out of the way. If thoughts float across your awareness, reflecting on the words you have heard or anticipating the logistics of tomorrow, simply treat them as distant, empty clouds moving across the infinite night sky of your consciousness. They have a right to pass by, but they have absolutely no power to disturb the deep, clear, and luminous tranquility of your true nature. You are not the thoughts, you are the vast, silent space in which the night unfolds. Surrender completely to the unforced baseline of non-doing. Slide effortlessly across the threshold of the waking world and drift into the deep, endless ocean of peaceful, unconditioned rest. Carry the quiet, unshakable sanctuary of Zen into your dreams, knowing that your true nature is, and has always been, completely whole, beautifully radiant, and profoundly free. Good night, and rest well within the boundless peace that is your eternal birthright. Systematic reference matrix, the Zen contemplative architecture. To provide a clear, Scannable map of the core principles and practices explored across this masterclass. The unified reference matrix below organizes the structural components of the path. The paradigm shift Buddhism as empiricism, rejects external dogmas and creator dependencies, demands personal first-person verification hipasiko, focuses entirely on the somatic reality of the present moment rather than metaphysical speculation. The diagnostic blueprint, the nature of desire, identifies craving tana as an insatiable cycle of lack, structurally compared to licking honey from a sharp knife blade. True resolution occurs not by satisfying the itch, but by dissolving the illusion of the separate, incomplete self. The metaphysical framework, the four Dharma worlds, outlines reality through the Hawaiian layers of particulars G, absolute unity Re, harmony between form and formlessness Re-G, and the infinite mutual interpenetration of all phenomena G-G, symbolized by Indra's net. The primary meditation tool, the mechanics of Zazen. Minimalist practice of just sitting Shikantaza utilizes a precise triangular physical base, a vertically aligned spinal axis, the cosmic mudra, and a soft open gaze to manifest baseline awareness effortlessly. The aesthetic embodiment wabi-sabi kintsugi finds the cosmic within the imperfect, the transient, and the weathered, celebrates the gold-gilded fractures of human experience, proving that psychological scars are unique coordinates of beauty and resilience. The relational reality, seeing without a script, discharges the heavy psychological burden of past relational trauma by dissolving fixed conceptual images of others, practicing beginner's mind and leaving historical grievances at the mud puddle. The ultimate destination, the religion of no religion. The discovery that liberation is not a distant reward or an exotic achievement, but the inherent, sky-like nature of your baseline awareness, fully available in this exact breath.